What it do, what it do, what it do. You know the drill. We got a bunch of stuff to do before we actually get the show started, but I'm going to let people matriculate in, and while they do that, I'm going to play some music. Shout out to Christina Gukis, who today's her girlfriend's birthday. Shout out to her. Play some beats, play some jams, bro. Play some beats, bro. An update is available. Restart your app, of course. Ow, man. Yo, I hurt my knees yesterday playing Quidditch. Fucking sucks, man. Like the base of both of my knees hurt in the same exact spot. So weird. And I wore some cleats that I've worn before in tournaments. Fucking weird. Interesting. Shout out to Anita Baker. Apparently she's performing today. Or soon. I don't know why I'm looking at that, and I should be focused on fuck. So probably, I don't know, Ashton. Open up your stream so you can see. So people can see you. I love how, like, I can... My personal account does not show when I go live on my stream, and I find that interesting because it's like... What's the point of doing, like, live streams or whatever if people aren't going to see you when you go live? I gotta figure out how to... I guess I have to, I guess I have to start setting fucking notifications anyway. Save to watch later. There's a lot of drama going on in the podcast world in particular. Ooh. Samuel Gold dropped some info. Save to watch later. Anyway, shows NBC Sports while they're live. Doesn't show me though. Whatever, bro. Anyway, what the fuck am I doing? Right. Sorry, gotta get my stream up. Shows when I'm searching my own stream. Alright, cool. That's there. What volume is this on? 18? Clutch. Shout out to the DJ feature. As usual, if you got some shit to say, put it in the chat. Even if y'all have anything to say, put it in the chat. What's going on here? Damn. Congratulations, man. A lot of people get to walk away from the game. Oh, Anthony Levine Sr. Oh, he is retired. Shout out to him. Shout out to Anthony Levine. been on the Ravens for a really long time, to be honest with you. Final score. Twitch, right? I don't know why. Whatever. Brain farting today. Hopefully you don't do it on the show. By the way, 100% have after effects because of that from your gal COVID. Oh, by the way, if you haven't been paying attention, Antonio Brown is making the rounds on multiple podcasts and just spewing absolute bullshit. Just spewing absolute horse shit. He was on I Am Athlete, and for as bad as Brandon Marshall is as a host right now, I'm assuming he's going to get better. They changed up his entire lineup or whatever of people. His entire cast and crew and all that kind of shit like that. I don't know why. I just saw an episode from Chad Johnson's podcast called the Pivot Podcast. I guess that's a thing now. I didn't even know I was subscribed to it, but I'm assuming it got aggregated into my feed because of I'm subscribed to I Am Athlete. So they were having a conversation, looks like, about why they're not on I Am Athlete anymore. But basically, Antonio Brown went on the show. Well, he didn't go on the show. They went to Antonio Brown's house in L.A., and Brandon Marshall, who I'll say tries to be as amicable to the people that are on his podcast as much as possible, because he always wants to push the idea that we don't understand what's going on behind the scenes with a lot of athletes, which, opens my mind to, like, hey, Ashton, you're kind of like... there's no way you can know what's going on in that guy's personal life and all that kind of jazz like that, because I talk about constantly on this show how if you watched every single press conference and listened to everything every podcast they've ever been on, every single press conference they've ever done, every interview they've ever done, read every article written about them, you still wouldn't understand 1% of the life of the person that you were talking about. That's literally it. So yeah. Yeah. No, that's interesting. Was I saying something? I don't remember. But yeah, Antonio Brown's just talking bullshit, man. Like, and this is, I will admit to my biases. I already don't like Antonio Brown. I'm not one of those people who gives you the benefit of the doubt when it comes to mental health. One, he doesn't. I mean, if he's suffering from, if he's battling something mental health wise, who knows what it is. But for the most part, he says he's fine, which I think a lot of people do. Mainly because if you've grown up in an environment, which a lot of people in America grow up in an environment where you do not, how do I say this? A lot of people grow up in an environment where you do not spend your time talking about like your mental health and your struggle and stuff like that. And if you know anything about Antonio Brown's background, about, his relationship with his father, who kind of, I wouldn't even say kind of, I don't think Antonio Brown would say kind of, but like he abandoned their family to continue his like college football career, I believe is what it was off the top of my head. But yeah, man. And then, they struggled because that's what people do. Young people with children, that's typically how it goes, especially if you're not rich or wealthy or anything like that. You struggle. And that is exactly what happened, man. That's exactly what happened. So, and that's definitely something that's molded who he is. But I mean, don't listen to me. I've already ranted and raved on this show, on the main podcast multiple times about Antonio Brown and how I dislike seemingly him as a person. I dislike what I know about him as a person because he seems to be kind of an asshole. I think what I dislike the most is the fact that he never admits to being wrong. That's like my biggest beef, hands down. Never admits to being wrong whatsoever. So, yeah. that's always going to be something that rubs me wrong, because I feel like I've always been, especially in the environment I grew up in, I've been blamed a ton for stuff that I never did, simply because, like, I don't know, man, biases and shit like that. And then on top of that, I don't know, man, like, it seems like he's always, it's like there's a lot of times where you see something happen and you're like, yeah, that's very clearly somebody's racial bias coming into play. But he's trying to claim, like, he's tried to claim on multiple occasions, like, racial bias towards him in situations that are, like, cut and dry, like legal cases and speeding and shit like that. But yeah, like, he's never admitted that he's wrong in anything that he's ever done. And so that tells you everything you need to know about a person that continues to either remove themselves from every situation they're in, and then all of a sudden they never did anything wrong, right? Like, even on that podcast, even on the I Am Athlete podcast, he, like, doesn't even admit that him running off the field, him, like, taking his gear off and stuff like that was wrong. He spends most of the podcast trying to explain to you how he's like, what you expect me to do? What do you expect me to do? What do you expect me to do? And then when people try and tell him what they kind of expect for a normal person to do in that situation, he loses his shit. Like, he doesn't get mad. He's just kind of like, he explains it away every single time. And then the second you bring up something about him, he gets upset, right? So it's interesting. Yep. Ooh, man. What the fuck was I doing? Yeah, no. Just. Yeah, so, yeah, that's the thing. No, that's the thing about Antonio Brown, man. It's rough. We haven't started the show yet, so if you're hopping in the chat or anything like that, shout out to you. We have not even yet begun to talk about sports, but, this is the NFL only podcast, so the only thing we'll be talking about is, why did the music stop? What the fuck? That's what it is. That's the problem. I thought I was supposed to play the entire thing. There it is. It should play automatically now. But yeah, it's interesting to hear his thoughts on a lot of things. Sometimes he doesn't come off like necessarily like he's rich and stuff like that because he's worked hard and he's athletic. And I think he also is not even entitlement. It's just like he knows that people won't. He's so athletic that people won't question him, and now he's not been questioned for so long because the sport itself and like sports in general harbors like shitty people who are really good at something. So, but yeah, once again, I don't know Antonio Brown at all. All I can do is base everything that I say off of what he does structurally, and I find it annoying that I find myself constantly having to talk about him and the bullshit that he purports, man, because a lot of it is some of this stuff that he tries to get down with is very clearly him hiding behind him taking actual issues that people suffer from and turning them into his stuff, when a lot of his problem is him related. Like the stuff he talks about, like the black culture in the podcast, he talks about like how none of the vets tried to help him out when he was in the league. And I was like, that's really hard for me to believe that none of the vets in the NFL helped you out or tried to reach out to you or tried to connect to you as a person, because that's like the tenet of sports. That's like the tenet of like professional sports. Now, were you in a position where you were ready and willing to accept what they were trying to tell you? Who knows, man? But once again, I don't know Antonio Brown. Anyway, we're about to send this tweet and get the show started. Twitter. Oh shit. Now we come to the tough part, guys. Twitter ban. Why is that trending? It kind of doesn't make sense that Twitter ban is trending. Twitch, YouTube. What else? What else? Oh, my bad. Who's on YouTube? I gotta come up with a better way to check the chat, but it's a problem for future Ashton, not current Ashton. Sorry, I'm trying to think of hashtags, guys. Especially the ones that work. Let's go. We got ourselves a Twitter bomb. You guys remember those? If you're not familiar with the early burgeoning of Twitter, Twitter bombs are when you use all of the characters available in a tweet. So yeah, it's stupid. But yeah, I remember that was like one of the first things I learned about Twitter, and I was like, okay, I don't get why that's a good thing, but imagine, like, you guys remember a time when like Twitter had way fewer characters? I do. All right. Also, we're gonna try something out. Oh shit, I fucked it up. Also, I found out a way that like you can like plug your. Oh no, there's like apparently a way to plug the link to your Twitch, which is interesting. Plug a link to your Twitch on Yep, there it is. Should probably actually have the URL ready, but hey, what do I know? Key links, major key. Should I put Twitch or should I put YouTube on here? I kind of want my YouTube to blow up. Let's try this. Actually, we can do both. Copy. Wow, you can only do one. I love how like this podcast in particular, like this one where it progressively has less and less stuff for me to do, but as you get deeper into the season, there's more research you have to do, because like these games get broken apart and talked about in like a bajillion different ways. Anyway, that's not a problem for you. That's a problem for me. It's a me problem. Dun, dun, dun. Also, if you are a musician, and you want your beats played on here, played on the show, let me know, and I can figure out a way to label it so that when your song is playing, that you know. All right, it's time to get this popping. Let's get on point here, boys and gals. What is with the formatting for shit right now? God damn. Yo, man. All right, here we go. Going live in 3, 2. Well, we're already live, but starting the show in 3, 2, 1. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and everybody else in between, I'm Ashton Gene Lewis. This is the Broke Boy Sports Podcast, and it's time. We are 2 games away from the Superb Owl and the NFL season being over with. Well, we're 3 if you include the Pro Bowl, which I am, as I get older, getting closer and closer to not including it in the count for the games. But yeah, the big weekend is coming up here, championship weekend. And honestly, I tweeted about this, but I guess I should kind of talk about it. And maybe I'll talk about it on both of the shows. But this upcoming weekend is championship weekend for the AFC and the NFC division. It is going to decide who ends up participating and competing in the Super Bowl. For a lot of sports fans, some of you are people who watch the NFL every single week with the same group of people who watch it, who are dedicated to watching football, who are about it, who are about that life. I pretty much watch football with the same group of people every single weekend. And, some of their interest wane depending on how their teams are doing that season, but I consider it to be some of the most precious time that I spend with people in general. So if I watch football with you, I like you as a person a lot. Even if you don't necessarily like football, I enjoy watching football with the people that I care about. Which is why sometimes it gets so frustrating when people who don't know what they're talking about jump into my conversation that I'm having with my friend. It happens almost at every bar we go to, when people can hear our conversation being had and they jump in with their opinion of I think Aaron Rodgers I think they're gonna win because of how they feel and emotions and stuff like that, which emotions do weigh heavily into how players perform on a certain basis. But we're talking about actual X's and O's, time strategies and stuff like that, and people don't people regurgitate what they hear on TV or what they hear on radio or what they hear on podcasts all the time. Which I used to be that kind of guy until I wanted to become the guy that people regurgitate, I guess. But nonetheless, it's still something that if I ever make it in this whole game, it's going to be one of my biggest flaws, hands down, is dealing with the fact that people want to tell you their shitty sports takes all the time, unsolicited, which happens all the time. If people hear me listening to a sports podcast, they interrupt me listening to a sports podcast to tell me their shitty sports opinion, and I'm like, cool, thank you. Appreciate that. Not at all. Anyway, I brought up why why the championship weekend is so important to me personally is because it's the last time before the casuals or the people who are just not connected to football in any way, shape, or form. Because there's a certain group of people who only watch playoff football. I feel like that percentage of people is significantly smaller than what we hear about in the NBA. But there are people who only watch playoff football, and then there's people who only show up for the Super Bowl because of the party that's around it, which is understandable. I respect the hell out of that. I really do. But the fact of the matter is, man, I know at the Super Bowl there's going to be people who don't watch football. They're at the party having a good time, and that's perfectly fine. Whereas, I care a shit ton about the actual football that's being played, right? Because it's the culmination of watching football for months on end to finally see who's going to be the champion. It's it's the end of a big competition and a season-long competition where teams have gone through hell and back to get to a chance to play in this game that they could potentially lose. That still weighs heavy on you, right? You get to the Super Bowl and there has to be somebody who loses the game. And when you know that those teams have overcome in every single facet of the form, overcome a lot of adversity to get to where they are. So I know that that's what's going to happen in 2 weeks after this upcoming weekend, right? And I mentally prepare myself for that. I understand there's going to be people who don't give a shit about football and talk about stuff over the top of the game sometimes. There's going to be people who need rules explained, which is perfectly fine. I've never been a person that has had an issue with explaining why in the game people certain things happen. It's the people that talk definitively about things that they don't understand that annoy the fuck out of me when it comes to sports. But yeah. This weekend is the last weekend for me personally, because usually championship weekend my non-sportsy friends do not watch it, and my sportsy friends, this is a huge deal for all of us, right? And this is the last big weekend where I can still, it's the highest level of game where it is still the hardcore football fans, I think. For me personally. And I cherish this weekend, I would say, more than I cherish Super Bowl game day, right? And I wake up at like 7 a.m. on Super Bowl Sunday because I know there's going to be a ton of coverage, even though I already know like what all the stories are. I know every single story that they're going to talk about because they spend 2 weeks hyping it up. And then on top of that, like I pay attention to football. I watch football, rewatch games every single Monday and Tuesday before I do the show, right? I read articles. I listen to podcasts. I listen to radio interviews. I'm on Twitter all the time. And I don't need the stories that they're trying to set up for me to enjoy what's going to happen on the football field, but other people do, and that's totally understandable because they're basically trying to update and give information to an entire country, the entire world, who has not been able to watch football this entire season. They're trying to get them up to date on all these teams, and that's perfectly fine with me. But championship weekend is like the last weekend where I get to enjoy football with my football friends because that following Super Bowl Sunday, there's going to be people who have watched like 5 games at the Super Bowl party. So I don't know if your friend group is like that or if every person in your friend group is sportsy or whatever. I'm kind of jealous to a certain degree, but also not, because I will say this. I get caught up and I lose my grip on like what the average person knows or like what the regular non-sportsy person knows in relation to a lot. Like my girlfriend this past weekend, she watched one of the playoff games with me, right? I was surprised that she got through one. But the fact of the matter is she enjoyed, I guess, the playoff game that she did watch because of the drama, and I'm pretty sure it was because of my yelling and screaming to a certain degree. But she also enjoyed watching football through the lens of Twitter reacting via shitting on opposing quarterbacks they didn't like losing. Spoiler alert, Aaron Rodgers lost this past weekend. Spoiler alert, Tom Brady lost this past weekend. And a lot of people, especially in Black Twitter, because of those guys who have... And really, the Aaron Rodgers thing is not even like a Black Twitter thing. That's like a liberal versus conservative thing because of free thought. And really talks about like woke culture all the time too, which is like the biggest red flag on the face of the planet. But on top of that, like Tom Brady, who showed support for Donald Trump, I want to say like 4 years ago, and people have not moved on from that or whatever because they know for a fact like he fits all of the demographics to be a Republican, right? Like he's a rich white guy who definitely benefits from like the fact that Republicans seek to, you know what? I don't even need to talk about that kind of deal. He benefits from the tax breaks. Let's call it that, right? But yeah, a lot of people also don't like Tom Brady because he's probably beaten. Yo, what up, dude? What's up, Dinky D? Shout out to you. Jumping into the chat for the first time ever. Yo, what's good, man? We're here talking about the NFL playoffs. So, yeah, shout out to you. If you got anything you want to say, I'm talking about the Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers drama stuff, how my girlfriend watched the NFL playoffs through the lens of a person on Twitter who didn't know anything about the teams or any strategy or anything like that. She just knew the final score. She saw the cool plays that happened and all that kind of stuff like that. She saw the hard hits, and she saw it through the lens of people clowning those two quarterbacks for losing. Those people throwing up memes, those people throwing up clips, those people cracking jokes. And it's just so wild to me because, like, you need like regular, normal, like non-psychopathic sports people in your life if you're a sportsy guy, because it keeps you grounded in terms of, like, this is what the real world does, right? This is what people who watch, like, The Bachelor, who are not sports fans, this is what people who actually, you know, do constructive things with their free time do, besides watching football and basketball. And that was a good reminder for me this weekend. And I enjoy it, but when it's time to watch football, it's time to watch football for me. Shout out, I don't know how Dinky D227 got into the chat, but shout out to them for showing up and showing out. If they got any questions or anything they need to say, feel free to type it in. Yeah, that's on Twitch, by the way. If you're watching on YouTube, that's what I'm talking to. But yeah, we are live. We're live simulcasting on Twitch and on YouTube. So, yeah. Feel free to check out either one. Also, like and subscribe. Hit that notification bell. I'm trying to do better about doing the whole, like, pulling down my live streams and then re-upload, like, doing a premiere thing so it sets up a notification so more people watch it, which is what I'm going to do after this show is over with. But we need to talk about some stuff. We need to talk about some football, right? We need to talk about these games. We'll take it from, we'll start from the top, right? We're just going to break down these games and then the podcast will be over with. If you got anything you need to say throughout the course of the show, feel free to say it. But final score, Rams, the 4 seed, the Rams, which, by the way, this entire weekend was filled with just people beating up the high seeds. Like the number 1 and the number 2 seed out of both divisions lost. Actually, sorry, the Kansas City Chiefs won. Spoiler alert. But we'll talk about that when we get to it. Nonetheless, that was my rant about why championship weekend is so important to me as a sports fan. And I'll never be able to cut that up for social media or anything like that. I just wanted to share it with the people who were on the show because I don't know if other people can relate to it. That's how I view championship weekend. So, yeah, that's pretty much it. Anyway, moving on. We got, what are we doing? Oh, right, football. So, the 4 seed, the Rams, took on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the 2 seed in this one. And for some reason, more so than this year, more so ever than this year, the seeding doesn't fucking matter. Like, all these teams were just too good. Like, these matchups are ridiculous. Like, the Rams versus the Bucs, those are 2 of the best teams in the those are 2 of the best teams in the NFL. That's not like a schedule. Those are not schedule hype beasts. They're not people who kind of like cheese their way into the playoffs, right? The Bills and the Chiefs. Definitely not teams that cheese their way into the playoffs. The Bills are a 3 seed somehow. The Bengals and the Tennessee Titans. Those are teams that played really well throughout the course of the regular season from beginning to end. Same thing with the 49ers and the Packers. They played really well from beginning to end this entire season. 49ers, they overcame the fact that sometimes they have a quarterback who's not very good. That happens. Anyway, Rams 30, Buccaneers 27. Wow, like, to me, I really don't know how to describe it, but I'll try to. The Rams dropped the hammer on the Bucs, and everything that the Buccaneers did to come back in this game was centered around things connected to the Rams messed up, not necessarily opportunities that the Buccaneers created. I will say, so the big thing out of this game, at one point, it was 20-6, 20-3. Let me double check that real quick. I think it was 20-3. At 20-3 at halftime. There were 4 fumbles in this game from the Rams. And the most important thing that comes out of this is, like, those 4 fumbles, they lost every single one of them. PFF talks about this all the time, and quite frankly, if you watch football, you know this is to be true as well. Like, fumbles, they're not like freak things that happen. People are trying to cause more fumbles and trying to cause as many fumbles as possible. Yeah, at halftime, it was 20-3, and there was a situation that happened that stopped it from being 27-3. But nonetheless, the fumbles, the way that they happen are not freak incidences. But the way they are recovered is truly statistically erratic, and you can tell why, because nobody knows how that fucking ball's gonna bounce, right? Like, nobody knows how that ball's gonna bounce. Also, there's no telling, like, once the play snaps, like, both of the teams are converging. So there's not like an advantage of, like, all of our players are on this side of the offense, or all of our players are on this line of scrimmage, this side of the line of scrimmage, all of our players are on this side of the line of scrimmage. When plays happen, players mix up and their locations change drastically depending upon, like, routes being run. There's sometimes, and you've seen it before, I'm sure if you've watched football before, you've seen the ball bounce right into somebody's hands. Like, they have magnets on them. And you've seen times where the ball seemingly has a mind of its own with the way it repels away from professional football players who are elite level athletes. You've seen it, you saw it in this game. There's times where, like, offensive linemen who have gigantic fucking hands, right? Who are taking their time. They're kind of walking towards the ball because they know it can bounce either to the left or to the right, and they still can't wrangle this egg-shaped ball. And that's what creates the erratic nature of it, which makes it even freakier that the Rams fumbled 4 times and lost all of them. That almost never happens, right? It's very rare that something like that will happen for a team in general. So that was a really wild part of this overall. But this is the other thing that goes along with that. Like we talked about last week when we were on the show, there's only been one team in the regular season for this past year that beat the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and turned the ball over in that game, and it was the Washington football team. And I went and looked up the instance, and it was like a relatively close point of the game. It was late in the third quarter, but the score was like 16-10 or something like that, and they turned the ball over, and the Buccaneers were able to they still weren't able to score against how well the Washington defense played, which, you want to talk about Jekyll and Hyde defense, they look like day and night from the first half of the season to the second half. But that's about a team that's not in the playoffs. But nonetheless, there's only been one team. Now there are 2. And on top of that, it was like it was actually the most amount of turnovers that the Buccaneers had generated this entire season, I'm pretty sure, because everything else is like 3 turnovers generated throughout the course of the season. Hold on. Yeah. Let me double check this. Yes. The only team that had 4 turnovers versus the Buccaneers this season was the Cowboys. And that was on Thursday Night Football. I don't even remember that game. I do not remember that game. That was weird. Was it... Oh, was that the Cooper Rush game? Hold on. I gotta check this out. What game was this? Who started this game? CeeDee Lamb, Amari Cooper, Antonio Brown was in here, Greg Zuerlein. So, yeah. The final score in this one was 30-24. And, Tampa Bay turned the ball over 4 times. My bad, guys. My bad on that one. Tampa Bay turned the ball over 4 times on that one. But, the final score, they still were able to win. Yeah, they still won 31-29 in that game. And that's actually really fucking freaky. Holy crap. The Bears had 5 turnovers versus the Buccaneers, which I think is that game where Justin Fields threw an interception on 3 consecutive drives. Anyway, I don't know what to tell you on that one, but yeah, that was weird. That was like really weird overall. That was a weird experience. It was a roller coaster of an experience. Nonetheless, we go back to what we're actually talking about this game. Freaky incident. The Rams turned the ball over 4 times, all via fumbles, by the way. No interceptions from Matthew Stafford. And if there was like one of 2 things you would have expected to happen in this game, it would be that it would not be that Matthew Stafford would come out of here with 0 interceptions, right? At this point, he was at the last 3 games of the season. He had 8 interceptions in 3 games, and now he's got 0 in playoff matchups. The freaky thing is, like, as successful as Cam Akers was in the playoffs and in the end of the regular season, now he comes in and he like almost gives the game away. By the way, if you watch that game, Cam Akers is the reason that they were able to get this huge lead to begin with, to get to 20-3, and he was also the reason the Buccaneers got back into the game. So easy come, easy go. But it's an interesting dynamic. Like I said, I felt like the Rams dropped the hammer. The Rams dropped the hammer on the Buccaneers. But one thing I will point out, just like the freakiness of the nature of the fumbles being recovered, it was also the positioning of it, because this goes back to what I was saying before. The Rams are the reason the Buccaneers were able to get back into this game. It wasn't plays that the Buccaneers made. The Rams fumbled the ball off of like a Cooper Kupp catch at their own 40-yard line. Then they fumbled. Cam Akers fumbled the ball at the 30-yard line. In Rams territory, that gave another touchdown to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And then this is the weird one, right? This is the one right before halftime. This is the key moment I was talking about, how it could have been like way worse at halftime. The Rams could have been up 27-3. Cam Akers was rushing the ball off the right-hand side to the point where the only person who could make the tackle was Antonio Winfield, the safety for the Buccaneers. And he forces a fumble at the 1-yard line, about 2 inches before Cam Akers' head touches the ground, which would have marked him down on the field, and it would have prevented that fumble from counting. Like, that's the weirdest thing, right? 27-3 would have been the halftime score if Cam Akers had been able to hold on to that ball and then possibly like dive into the end zone with one more play, like either Matthew Stafford does it or Cam Akers does it or whatever. There's a high likelihood that on the 1-yard line they get something out of it, either a field goal or a touchdown. But the freakiest of the freaky things on the list of things that can happen, a fumble by a running back that goes out of bounds and is recovered, or goes to a fumble on the 1-yard line through the back of the end zone for a touchback, right? I think that's what happened. Also, as this game was going on, there was like a couple of things that felt really unusual about it. In particular, the way that the Buccaneers came back was not as smooth as you typically are associated with Tom Brady. For the most part, I think a lot of people can attest to that. Usually when Tom Brady's coming back on you, everything goes wrong for the other team that they're playing. And the Rams are still able to like move the ball up and down the field. They even scored a touchdown in the 3rd quarter and the 4th quarter, along with the field goal that eventually would win them the game. But nonetheless, actually no, it was the touchdown. No, it was the field goal. There was a field goal and a touchdown in the 4th quarter for the Rams overall. But nonetheless, it was the one thing that kind of threw me off, and you can tell me if I'm wilding on this one. The ref calls we're not going the Buccaneers way or going the way of a Tom Brady-led team that we've all grown accustomed to in our youth of watching football with Tom Brady at the helm there. I think that's a legitimate thing to discuss in this one, and I felt it was kind of weird. One, it was an indicator that the Rams were in a position where they could not self-destruct, and yet they still found a way. They still found a way to almost blow this game. But nonetheless, I thought it was weird how everything kind of shook out the way it did, in the sense that the Bucs were not getting the calls that they normally get. And then on top of that, one thing that really tipped me off, one of the few penalties that was thrown in this game was against Tom Brady, and it was his first personal foul penalty in his 20 years in the NFL. And he was trying to get a call, and you could argue that he kind of had some kind of justification of getting hit in the face while he was throwing, and it cut his lip open or something like that, or got hit in like somebody's helmet cut his lip open, getting underneath his helmet, and he was trying to get a call to go his way. And I thought that was the wildest statement, because I was like, wow, man, Tom Brady never gets called for any type of penalty that's that related. And of course, it was the first time in 20 years they've been called for a 15-yard personal foul. So the thing in my head, I was like, oh, it's a wrap. Well, I'm like, that's it. That's it. When the football gods have betrayed you, everything goes wrong. And they still were able to come back. And I feel like everybody on Twitter was legitimately like, oh yeah, no, this is a comeback. It's got Tom Brady comeback written all over it. And I was like, I'm seeing a lot of resilience from the Buccaneers, but I'm not seeing the comeback energy like we're all accustomed to. And they did get to the point where they tied the game up, but I felt pretty confident, one, because we talked about this on the show already, right? Like both of these guys are like Tom Brady's first or Tom Brady's second with 52 game-winning drives, and then Matthew Stafford is third all-time in the NFL in game-winning drives with 42. He's tied with like three other people or something like that. Well, not tied anymore. He's by himself with 43. But yeah, it was seeing that penalty, and then on top of that, knowing that Matthew Stafford was going to get one more drive to possibly get a touchdown or get a touchdown or a field goal out of this, I wasn't feeling all that worried about the final drive of that game, because I was like, I mean, it's Matthew Stafford. He's really clutch. If you watch any Lions games in the past 7 years or 8 years that he's been, however many years he was with the Lions, you know that Matthew Stafford is clutch. Like, if there's ever a time to not question Matthew Stafford, it is the final drive of a game. And if you are a team that wants to win a championship, that's one hell of a spot to be in, especially combined with the fact that he, found Cooper Kupp, and his connection with Cooper Kupp is damn near rivaling the connection that Devontae Adams has with Aaron Rodgers, right? Matthew Stafford led a game-winning drive that started with a 2-yard sack and had 42 seconds left on the clock. He burned the Buccaneers on back-to-back blitzes for 64 yards in 15 seconds of real time, and then they spiked the ball. That sounds pretty fucking clutch to me. And Matthew Stafford does it again. I'll be interested to see what a lot of people who really hate on Stafford have to say as they come up on the NFC Championship game in his first year ever as the quarterback for the Rams, because it's getting to the point where all the people like me and all the people like Martin, who we've had this discussion on the show before, if there was ever a quarterback who had a legitimate argument for becoming a Hall of Famer without ever going and winning in the playoffs, it is Matthew Stafford. It is hands down Matthew Stafford. And of course, the regular season, clearly a different beast than the postseason. You can tell by the way that Matthew Stafford plays. You can tell by the way that every team in the NFL plays when they get to the postseason, regardless of if they're 100% healthy or even injured. The mess that is the playoffs. The playoffs as a tournament bracket format is totally different, right? It takes genius level coaches, or some of the best coaches in the NFL, and maybe in certain cases you talk about like how it changes Bill Belichick and a lot of other players and a lot of other coaches, some of the best players to ever play the game, some of the best coaches to ever coach in the game, and it mushes their brain. The playoffs are a totally different existence. But if there was ever a guy who had an argument for being a Hall of Famer without ever going to a playoff game and winning a playoff game, it is the Detroit Lions' Matthew Stafford. And now he's gotten two chances to prove and two chances to go out there and disprove people who say that he's the reason that the Rams lost. And today, during this game, he was on Sunday, Matthew Stafford was the reason the Rams won this game. Despite all the things that were going on around him, he seemed to be one of the few situations that was consistent and steady in it, right? The Buccaneers were in the midst of like a classic Tom Brady comeback, and it just didn't go their way. So we move on to another classic here. Final score, like I said before, final score now were Rams 30, Buccaneers 27, and the Rams move on, and they will have to, if they want to go to the Super Bowl, they will have to overcome one of the biggest challenges of their entire existence as a franchise, as of right in the current rendition of their franchise. Sean McVay's 3-7 and curling on a 6-game losing streak against the team that they're going to be playing in the NFC Championship game, the Kyle Shanahan-led San Francisco 49ers. Also, by the way, can't imagine how bad a take it was for all the idiot 49ers fans that wanted to fire Kyle Shanahan. I've been talking about it for years, and how Kyle Shanahan and apparently Matt LaFleur and DeMeco Ryan, I've been saying the 49ers are the epitome of the biggest mistakes the Texans have ever made. And that was before DeMeco Ryans was the defensive coordinator. Now it's even more so true. DeMeco Ryans is one of the greatest, if not the greatest defensive player in the history of the Houston Texans. Yes, that means more impactful than J.J. Watt, who has literally done things that have never been done in NFL history. But at the middle linebacker position, a position that gets more and more difficult as the years go on, because you have to figure out how to be able to stop tight ends, be able to cover running backs, be able to take on run blocks against offensive linemen who are getting faster and stronger and all kind of stuff like that, and figure out how to come up with tackles. And on top of that, it's the most thankless defensive position there is in the game. But nonetheless, DeMeco Ryans, hands down the greatest linebacker that's ever played in a Houston Texans uniform, and in my opinion, the best defensive player that's ever played for the team. He goes to the Eagles, breaks their single-season tackle record, retires a couple years later, and then now is the defensive coordinator for the San Francisco 49ers, who just held Aaron Rodgers and the Packers to 10 points in a playoff game. You know, like I said, the 49ers are an amalgamation of the biggest mistakes the Texans organization have ever made. And I'm not salty about it at all. 42-36 in what, quite frankly, may be the greatest playoff game, or top 5 playoff game that I've ever seen. Amazing, top to bottom. The Kansas City Chiefs versus the Buffalo Bills. The only thing that was really disappointing, as most of you guys know, I'm a big defensive guy. I love me some defensive football, and it seemed like this game was lacking a lot of defense across the board. But it was mainly because the offenses that they were playing against are prolific on a level that I don't think we grasped just yet, because of, like, it takes us sometimes, especially like as a sports community, it takes us years to realize how amazing things were retroactively, right? Like Chris Johnson rushing for 2,000 yards was absolutely amazing in the moment that it happened, but it's even more amazing now that we're years removed from it, especially considering how difficult it is for guys like even Derrick Henry to eclipse that kind of number, right? Who he has done it, right? But it's insane to think about, as time goes on, that this could be, when we look back on it, a key moment in the birth of the next wave and generation of the NFL, right? A lot of people were talking about it that way. We had the Monday Night Football game. For some reason, there was one universal tie between these games. We had the Monday Night Football game that people said was the future of football. It was the first game in NFL history that was 100 combined points, right? When the Rams played the Chiefs on Monday Night Football, and how there was like multiple defensive touchdowns and there was a ton of offense going back and forth. And a lot of people talked about how that the Rams versus the Chiefs was going to be the next big thing. And it looks like right now, more so than ever, the Bills versus the Chiefs is lining up to be that next big rivalry, especially considering on the quarterback level, there is a viable matchup in terms of quality of play. And as time goes on, of course, the Bills are going to have to go through the same process that the Chiefs went through, and that's go all in on the fact that they have a prolific level quarterback, and a lot of these other positions are going to be hurting. They're going to have to get a lot better at drafting, but they've been pretty on point lately, as you can tell, with guys like A.J. Epinesa, who have like gotten to their rotation, Ed Oliver, who have done a pretty good job as well. But looking at what their situation is now, like Levi Wallace, Jordan Poyer, all those guys, Dane Johnson, who stepped in for Tre'Davious White and has looked pretty competent. And of course, in this game versus like Tyreek Hill and Mecole Hardman, who are two of the fastest guys in the NFL. And then, of course, add in Travis Kelce. Everybody's going to look bad, right, defensively. But nonetheless, back and forth affair this one went. And of course, the most exciting part was the absolutely ridiculous, almost scoring at will at this point in the final 2 minutes of this game. So here it is. In the fourth quarter, there was a Harrison Butker field goal from 28 yards, and then with a minute 54 left, Gabriel Davis scored his third touchdown, because I want to point out in this game, the most touchdowns by a single individual player were scored in this game, and it was Gabriel Davis with 4 touchdowns in this game, and his team lost. That's the kind of quality of game we're talking about. That's the key thing that we're talking about here. So Gabriel Davis, 27-yard touchdown pass from Josh Allen. They go for a 2-point conversion. It is successful to make the score 29-33 in favor of the Buffalo Bills. And then a minute and 2 seconds later, Tyreek Hill with a 64-yard touchdown pass from Patrick Mahomes kicks the field goal. That makes it 36-33. And then with 13 seconds left on the clock, Gabriel Davis catches his 4th touchdown pass in the night that gets him over 200 yards receiving in this game from Josh Allen, a 19-yard pass that makes the score 36-33. I'm sorry, 36-33. The Kansas City Chiefs get the ball with 13 seconds left on the clock, and the Buffalo Bills, and a lot of people are really kicking them in the nuts for this one, but they played prevent defense to protect the sideline, despite the fact that the Kansas City Chiefs had all their timeouts left. They had all of their timeouts remaining in this matchup, which is important in the grand scheme of things when you're talking about why you don't have to defend the sideline versus a team that has all their timeouts left. They control the clock. They control the 13 seconds left on the clock regardless, even if they don't go out of bounds, right? Even if they take a sack, they have a timeout that they can burn to stop the sack from counting, and they have 3 chances to do this. So they have 3 plays where they can stop the clock afterwards. They don't need to run out of bounds yet. And so because of the defensive alignment they're in to protect the sideline, the middle was wide open. I don't know if you guys know this or not. Travis Kelce is possibly the best tight end in NFL history on the come up. So Gronkowski is obviously the best tight end in the history of the NFL right now, and a lot of that is centered around not only just the yardage and the touchdowns. That was my reminder to set my NBA fantasy lineup, which you should do as well. Make sure you do that. Anyway, there's a lot of There's a lot, of course, argument in terms of statistics of why Gronk is the best, the greatest to ever do it. Travis Kelce's got to be right behind him. George Kittle's got to be right behind those guys. Those guys are prolific. Travis Kelce, wide open over the middle, gets a ton of yardage and gets them into field goal range. And Harrison Butker, who is one of the best kickers in the NFL this past season, kicks a field goal to force it into overtime, ladies and gentlemen. And then, of course, what is pretty brutal, the overtime rules kick in. And of course, if you don't know, I guess we should explain it now. If you're a person that doesn't watch football, pay attention. It may be a factor in the Super Bowl or this upcoming weekend. NFL playoff rules used to be sudden death, so people would get they would kick off, get the ball, and hopefully get into enemy territory. So they would get past the 50-yard line. They would get to the 30-something yard line, kick a field goal, and the game would be over. It would suck because a field goal kicker would get to have the most power on a field after a full-on football game happened. And then a field goal of 3 points would decide whether or not a full team of football players won or lost the game. And then they changed the rule to where if you kick a field goal, the other team gets a chance on offense to come down and they get a possession. If they kick a field goal, the OT continues. If they get a touchdown, the OT is over. So the first touchdown is the sudden death moment. So there is a sudden death of NFL playoff football. It is just not any type of scoring. It has to be a touchdown. So with the way that the Chiefs play football, that is all but a guarantee. It is, as Thanos once said, inevitable. But yeah, Travis Kelce and it was a 3-play drive or something like that? Hold on, let me double check. But yeah, the Kansas City Chiefs go down, they run it, they cook once again, as they've had for the last 3 minutes of this game. This is a 10-play drive or something like that. They run the ball up the middle, they pass it 6 times, they pass it 5 times they pass it 7 times in a row, and the 7th one is a passing touchdown to Travis Kelce off of a fade route in the back right-hand corner of the end zone. Beautiful play. It really was. It takes advantage perfectly of not only Travis Kelce's absolutely impeccable control of his own body, but on top of the fact that he's bigger than any corner that you're going to be able to put on him, he catches a touchdown, and the Kansas City Chiefs advance onto the AFC Championship for the third consecutive year. Absolutely absurd to think about the way that they are currently changing not only the way offenses are called, but the way that football is played in general, because the Kansas City Chiefs are a team that has shown great versatility throughout the course of the season, but the fact of the matter is that Patrick Mahomes is a transcendent level football player. I would say that if you look at this in totality, of course, it came down to a couple of plays here and there, the big margin of difference, because you can sit there and talk about how that prevent defense call was what really did in the Buffalo Bills, which is bullshit, because it's never the last play that does you in. It's the plays before it. It's the possessions before that. It's the turnovers. It's the one drive where you don't get the 2 yards you need and you have to punt on 4th and 2. There's a multitude of things that happen that lead to you being in a position where you have to play prevent defense with 13 seconds left on the clock, and you have to figure out a way to stop the opposing team from getting a field goal to go in overtime and lose. There's a lot of things that happen before that that sets you up into this situation. It just puts pressure on one play to be the difference maker, or a couple of plays to be the difference maker. I would say, based off of like we talked about this before, right? Like the Buffalo Bills, they had one of the best defenses in the NFL this past season, especially in the secondary, and that was without Tre'Davious White, which is freaky to think about, because I feel like this game is on a whole different level if Tre'Davious White is out there playing corner, because if Tre'Davious White is playing corner, they increase their chances of winning this game significantly, like at a ridiculously high level, right? But nonetheless, the Chiefs 42-36 on this one. That is the Chiefs defense and the Bills defense basically played on the same level in this game. And it was because of the effort of the quarterbacks, obviously, and the wide receivers and the running backs just killing it all over the place, and the tight ends as well. But the level of these quarterbacks turned a potential number 1 defense in the NFL and made it on par with like a number 17 or a number 15 defense in the NFL. Like that's brutal. If you're the Buffalo Bills, who spent all this time in free agency and all this time studying in the draft, years leading up to this moment where you have a chance to go out there and beat one of the best quarterbacks to ever live at this point, right? And he still is able to turn your borderline number 1, number 2, number 3 defense, whatever you want to make the number, and turn them into, an average defense at best. I'd hate to see what would happen to literally any other defense in the NFL that played against the Kansas City Chiefs in that position, because I feel like the Chiefs would have easily scored 50 or maybe even 60 points on any other defense, because the Bills defense is truly next level. So, but yeah, that's how that one shook out, man. Now, unlike all these other games where, like, at the end of the Rams game, everybody immediately was like, well, is Gronk going to come back? Is Tom Brady going to come back? Is this whole thing over with? Is Bruce Arians going to come back? I feel like we stopped talking about the fact that Bruce Arians was, like, retired, unretired, and then, like, was thinking about going out. I'm pretty sure he only came back because of this group of players that was able to go out there and do their thing. He talked about how, what is it? I was listening to another podcast, and they didn't corroborate and they didn't explain the math on this one. I think it was Pardon My Take, which means it's probably bullshit. But I think they can scrape together, keep this team together like one more year before people have to get paid, or people go to get paid or something like that. And of course, they'll have to find other like top tier players who want to play like on decent contracts or below average contracts for their talent to go and play for the Buccaneers, which could happen if Tom Brady's going on his last ride. And it would be nice to go into Tom Brady's last season knowing that it's his last season. You gotta, for whatever you have to say about certain people and stuff like that, there's something to be said about the victory lap. And I feel like my time in sports, the victory lap has been a lot more advertised. Like, it was really cool to see Dwayne Wade be like, this is my final year in the NBA. And everybody else getting to celebrate all the key moments, like any cool play that he made. It seemed like it was, maybe it was because media was going out of their way to make sure that no matter what Dwayne Wade did, if he did something that was really cool, it got to be on SportsCenter because people knew that it was going to be his last year, or they were told that this was his last season, right? I would like to go into I would like to go into this final season, or like go into a season knowing that Tom Brady is like, I'm done after this. Like, same thing with Peyton Manning. Like, we knew Peyton Manning was done after he won that Super Bowl. He's going to ride off into the sunset, which is really cool because you got to like savor those moments. And of course, that's important for the athlete as well, because a lot of, let's be for real, a lot of athletes at multiple levels don't know that they're playing their last game until afterwards. And it changes the way you do things. It does. Whether it be because of injury or it be because of life in general. So, moving on. The Bengals played the Tennessee Titans, and the final score was 19-16. I cannot tell you how this score is so unrepresentative of how insane this game was. Joe Burrow has two choices now. And I know you heard this joke a million times, but I have to do it. Joe Burrow has two choices. He's either got to take back the Christmas presents he got the O-line this year, or he has to be like, I'm going to call in a favor and I'm going to go on a pass for giving presents for the O-line this upcoming season. Because the way the offensive line play was actually not only offensive to Joe Burrow, but to football players everywhere. There's a lot of talented people who got embarrassed on that Bengals offensive line, and it was really disappointing to see. By the way, I went and looked up what Joe Burrow got his offensive line for Christmas this year. It was diamond-encrusted G-Shock watches, and the first thing that took me back was not the diamonds. I didn't know G-Shocks was still popping. I did not know G-Shocks were still out here popping in the streets. I remember being in high school and middle school, and people were obsessed with those, man. People used to buy so many fake G-Shocks from the Pulga around here and stuff like that. You know, from the mall and all that kind of jazz like that. But I didn't know you could put diamonds into them. But yeah, G-Shock watches apparently still popping in the streets. Shout out to them for being a long-standing, huge member of the culture, or just like life in general for people who want to look cool. G-Shocks do have a cool design to them, but I just didn't know they were still popping in the streets. Also, did not know that they had a setting that you could put diamonds into them, but here we are. On top of that, I think he doesn't get okay. So if he doesn't get them presents, or I'm sorry, if he chooses to like take back the presents from this past year, I will say the diamond encrusted G-Shock watches do have people's names engraved into the back plate. Which, hey, if you Joe Burrow and you want to get 10 G-Shock watches back from people, nobody's gonna know those things are engraved on the inside, right? They're like $210 each, which is clutch. I will say it looks cool. It's not a Rolex, but it still looks cool. And on top of that, he's still on his rookie deal, y'all. Y'all need to calm down. So, especially with the way, you gave up 9 sacks in a playoff game. Come on now. Anyway, the other thing he could definitely consider is just being like, maybe next season I withhold the Christmas presents until after the season is over with. And then we, based off of a combination of PFF grades and how my body feels, I decide who does and doesn't get presents, or if we all don't get presents for Christmas, right? To their credit, the Bengals line was knowingly not good coming into this playoff game, and to the credit of the Titans, their pressure was knowingly very elite in the NFL coming into this one. So technically what we thought was supposed to happen, or what was going to happen, actually happened. So we actually talked about it on the show. Remember that? We talked about how the Bengals offensive line, not great, and the Titans, their pressure is literally increased like by 40% in comparison to last season. So yeah, I hope we also learned the key math lesson out of this game as well. 9 sacks and 1 interception is much better than 1 sack and 3 interceptions. Who would have thought? Apparently losing a down from a sack is not as bad as losing an entire possession because you're throwing it to corners, or especially considering where the interceptions were thrown. Jesse Bates intercepting the first play of the game has got to be somewhat demoralizing, and then on top of that, got it into Tennessee territory. Luckily, their pressure was able to ward off the Bengals, but there was 3 possessions that were taken away from the Titans and given to the Bengals that definitely played into wearing down the Titans defense, which, by the way, they were asking a lot out of the Titans defense, and I think it's probably the most that I've seen the Titans offensively ask of their defense the entire year. But if I'm wrong, hit me up on Twitter at FB_playbook. Nonetheless, ladies and gentlemen, this game was insane. The 3 interceptions, by the way, 2 of them tipped off of wide receiver gloves, which was kind of weird, like a really weird happenstance, because like Julio Jones and A.J. Brown are really good at football, and one of them, A.J. Brown, had a like 60-something yard one-handed touchdown catch, and we got issues of the ball bouncing off people's hands. So I thought that was weird. One of the interceptions happens in the end zone, taking away a touchdown for sure, which is damaging emotionally for sure. And then the other one happens on the potential game-winning drive, taking away that opportunity, giving it to the Bengals, and they find a way on the last drive of the game to work their way downfield, get yet another clutch kick out of Evan McPherson, who, by the way, that's like his 7th game-winning kick this season. Remember when he was playing the Vikings and he had to go into overtime and he got a kick to tie the game up, and he kicked the game-winning field goal in overtime versus the Vikings, because once the first drive has happened in overtime for the NFL, if you kick a field goal on the second drive, you win, as long as they did not kick a field goal on the first drive. So if you get a defensive stop on the first drive completely where they don't get a touchdown or a field goal, you can kick a field goal to win on the game-winning drive afterwards. So like it's sudden death after the first drive essentially, which is weird. But nonetheless, a lot of people made a good argument, especially considering like it's not because they wanted the Bills to go out there and win that game. It was a lot of people making that argument because it felt really unfair, just like it did when field goals were the determining factor in overtime. It felt really unfair, or it didn't feel like that's the way a football game should end, considering like the defense goes out there and does their thing, but the offense doesn't get a chance to appear because of the way that the opposing team offense played. So it felt like the Bills should have gotten a chance to go out there at least to give and keep the game going. Which, once again, like we come back to the vicious circle of knowing what the solution to the problem is, but just not having the strength to do it. We know where the best overtime rules are at. It is in the collegiate level. College has the best overtime rules in all of sports. College football has the best overtime rules in all of sports. And if they just copied and pasted them, the competition committee could just move on, and they can get a lot of pats on the back. Because college overtime is wild as hell. College overtime, you start the ball at like the 35-yard line and you go until somebody can't respond to the score. So if you get a defensive stop and the other team gets a defensive stop, the offense comes back out there, and if the offense scores and you don't score, the offensive team wins. You just keep going until you get like, I got one, you got none. And it's amazing because it puts the defense out there with a chance to go out there and get stops. Because I think if you can run it back, if the defense can score a defensive touchdown, they win the game. I think that's a thing. If the defense scores a pick six or like a scoop and score fumble, you can win off of that because it's a defensive stop and a touchdown scored in one motion. So yeah. Moving on. Joe Burrow continues to become a legend. Like honestly living a movie at this point. And Ryan Tannehill is now squarely in the crosshairs of every single Titans fan because it seems like they do not want him to be their quarterback anymore. And I don't think they understand what they are implying, but I guess only time will tell. It's going to be, especially considering they signed him to a deal last season, be interesting. Interesting how that shakes out. But yeah, the Titans, like, to be honest with you, they're on the right path. They're going the right direction. They go in the right direction. Honestly, like the whole wide receiver thing, like they still have like one wide receiver they can depend upon. Julio Jones was hurt most of this season. They do not have a tight end. They lost Jonnu Smith, and they haven't replaced at the tight end position. They have not built up a wide receiver core, so it's interesting that a lot of people are mad at Ryan Tannehill when they know for a fact that basically outside, like they can depend upon heavily on A.J. Brown. And then Julio Jones, they can kind of depend upon. Maybe it's a 50-50 endeavor most of the time when you're trying to depend upon Julio Jones to not only show up and make big plays happen, because he didn't make any big plays happen this season, right? He was a guy who was able to catch the ball, but he was hurt most of the year. Hamstring, heel, all that kind of stuff. He was on IR multiple times this season. But after that, like, who do you throw the ball to? Like, Chester Rogers is out there, and I hate to keep bringing up Chester Rogers. I keep saying his name because he's literally, him and Anthony Fursker are like the only wide receivers I know for the Titans. But they don't have like a legitimate third. They don't have a legitimate tight end. They have a running back who they missed 8 games from this year, and I'm sure that would change how their season turned out if they had Derrick Henry the entire season. It would change the very nature of how their season played out. They're still working on getting even more pass rushing. They're working on getting linebackers that play better. They're working on specifically getting corners. Janoris Jenkins has been the ire of a lot of Tennessee Titans fans, not just my friend who's a Tennessee Titans fan, but most Tennessee Titans fans hate Janoris Jenkins because of the output that he put out this season, and he played in that playoff game hurt. He actually gave up a huge play to, was it T. Higgins or Jamar Chase down the right-hand sideline that got the Bengals into field goal position to win that game, and a lot of people were trying to blame him, and I'm like, I think it's more about the whole, he's hurt, and you still didn't have anybody else that you could depend upon to put out there to cover, because if there was one position that took the hardest hit from the Tennessee Titans, who, by the way, remember, they were the number 1 seed in the AFC, but they were also the most injured team in NFL history, it's definitely corner. That Bills game that they played on Monday Night Football where Josh Allen tried to do, I think it was like a QB, it was either QB power or it was like an RPO where he held onto the ball and he fell, oh no, it was a QB sneak on 4th and 1 to get the first down at the 1 yard line in goal to go position or whatever, and he slipped that game. On Monday Night Football, they had 5 corners get hurt. They had 5 DBs get hurt in that game. Anyway, moving on. Joe Burrow, still a legend. Joe Burrow still out here. Joe Shiesty still doing his thing. Oh, by the way, other note on the Bills-Kansas City game, I forgot to read this out, but shout out to the Chiefs fans. Apparently, they, in honor of the fact that the Bills Mafia, which, by the way, one of the most voracious fan bases in the game, but also some of the biggest givers in terms of donating, they're one of the most organized fan bases because the Mafia is for real, family ties for real. They decided to, in honor of beating the Bills, I guess, and also out of respect for Bills Mafia, which honestly at the top of the power rankings for sports fandoms in the game right now, they decided to donate $178,000 to the O'Shea Children's Hospital in Buffalo. And that was as of Wednesday. I'm assuming they're going to get over 200,000 by the end of the week, because as more of these stories come out, more people are going to donate. So that's why sometimes, guys, I know some of you are staunchly against when people record giving shoes to homeless people and stuff like that, because you feel like it's kind of grimy and it's kind of slimy. I think there's a way to appropriately show people doing good things to inspire others to do good things, because that's a thing for real with human beings. Humans mimic things that they see, especially things that they know are right. So when you show people volunteering, you show people working at food shelters, which is why when you show people modeling good behavior, other people get inspired to do it or want to do it that way. That's a real thing. But yeah, that was Bengals Titans. The Bengals are in the AFC Championship game after going 31 years without winning a single playoff game. So yeah, the Bengals are 1 game away from the Super Bowl, guys. Yeah, what a time to be alive. And our final game of the day, I had to rewatch this one. Oh, it took me 4 hours to rewatch this one because I was writing so many notes or whatever. But Packers, 49ers 13, Green Bay Packers 10. At this point, I feel like it's just science. The 49ers, they got the Packers number. This is the weird part, because when you look at the talent across the board, you feel like the talent gap is pretty much on par, except at the quarterback position and at the cornerback position. And the biggest gap, of course, the cornerback position, in my opinion, goes to the Packers, especially now that they put Eric Stokes out there in the secondary. But the quarterback position obviously goes to the Green Bay Packers. They have one of the best Packers quarterbacks ever, and then one of the best quarterbacks in the history of the NFL for sure. Instant Hall of Famer. Jimmy Garoppolo, not so much. Unless the story changes drastically, not on track to become a Hall of Famer. This is how it is. But yeah, the biggest gap is at those two positions. The first half of this game was basically the 49ers looking on offense like they had never played football a day in their lives. I kid you not. The 49ers defense was the star of the show here, ladies and gentlemen, and I'm sure a lot of people were not happy about that, because some of you dweebs don't know how to appreciate football in multiple forms. You only know how to, points on the board. The 49ers defense was really the star of the show. They were basically unstoppable. Like I said, the Packers got 10 points in this game. The only thing that really screwed them over was this one. First of all, the first drive, the Packers like sliced through them like Swiss cheese, right? What was it? This was the final drive of the first half, and it looked like it was quarters coverage, and the safety came down too early on a crossing route, like run by a tight end or something like that, and it allowed Aaron Jones to get loose on a streak route down the right-hand side, or sorry, on a swing route that turned into a streak, or turned into a 9 route down the right-hand sideline. He got open, got 75 yards out of that play, and the Packers immediately got sacked on the next play because the 49ers defense immediately, snapped back into reality, right? Oh, there goes gravity. They snap back into it. They sack Aaron Rodgers, and then they kick the field goal. And like I said, ladies and gentlemen, the 49ers were damn near unstoppable in this game. They blocked the field goal. So they went into halftime with the score being like 7-0 or something like that. The 7-0 is the final score, or 7-0 is the first half score. Jimmy G in this game did not have a completion until the 49ers' 7th drive of the game, which happened in the first half, because they had 4 consecutive 3-and-outs. And the first three and out, the third down play was a sack. And on the third and the fourth 3-and-outs, the third down play was a sack. This is the part where I talk to you about how hilarious the first half of this game was, because Jimmy G was actually really accurate in the first half of the game. The second half of the game is when he got sketchy, but for some reason in the second half of the game is when everybody started catching the ball. I kid you not, he had 3 drops in the first half. He had 2 of them on back-to-back plays that would have gone for 20-plus yards. That's the kind of night that Jimmy G was having, and somehow they still came out with the win. What do I know? There was a couple of times, like I said, the second half is when he started throwing sketchy passes. Like there was one time where Elijah Mitchell was running down the sideline, and Jimmy G threw it into double coverage, and Elijah Mitchell was able to come up with the catch. And Troy Aikman was talking about how the safety was dropping down. He was looking at Elijah Mitchell and the ball. He saw everything that was happening, and he chose to go for the tackle instead of the interception. And that was the only reason that Jimmy G did not give up a pick 6 on that play, which, that 6 points would have helped out a ton for the Green Bay Packers in this matchup, where they scored 10 points in it. And they scored a touchdown in the first half and scored a field goal in the second, which is, I'm sure, fantastic when they got back to the locker room. But yeah, moving on. In terms of the pressure aspect of it, I would be doing a massive disrespect if I did not give credit to 1, Kenny Clark, but 2, and most importantly in this situation, Rashawn Gary. If you don't know Rashawn Gary's story, Rashawn Gary was a fucking 5-star All-American, the quintessential, number 1 recruit in the country, right? And he actually panned out. He's panning out in the NFL. That almost never happens. He was a first-round pick for the Green Bay Packers. He played for Michigan when he was in college or whatever, and he was a part of that first wave of Harbaugh's Michigan reign, where they were kind of slowly figuring out maybe we're gonna have a tough time beating Ohio State, even with Harbaugh as the coach, and even with the super talented defense that we have. But nonetheless, Rashawn Gary is an example. And this is what he changed my mind on how Rivals in 24/7 and their assessment of players actually looks. He changed my mind to believe that they actually, shout out to the bots in the chat, they showed up today. He actually had me, because Rashawn Gary was so successful, and I didn't do it recently. I did this 2 years ago when he first got into the league, and he looked pretty good from the jump. And I was like, wow, man. I got to look at the other guys that they ranked below him. Wow, my photo almost fell over. My photo of Shaq and, of MJ and Kobe. But nonetheless, I was like, wow. So they're actually right about these things sometimes. They're not just handing out overzealous, over the top assessment of high school players. They're actually being genuine about their assessment of these guys. And Rashawn Gary is an example of a guy who went through the pipeline of being a 5-star, got to go to the top tier school, played college ball, got to the NFL, was a first round pick, and actually is panning out. He's getting better as time goes on. He's actually a huge reason why the defensive line was able to sustain Zadarius Smith, their best pass rusher, going down for so long, which, by the way, Zadarius Smith had a sack in this game. He was that first 3-and-out, third down sack that I was talking about. But, yeah, not a surprise. Zadarius Smith is a beast up front. Don't know why he is not still playing for the Ravens, but, hey, that's not for me to decide. Anyway, back to the game where literally every unit for the 49ers showed up except the offense. Legitimately, the final score was 13-10 in this one. There's a field goal in there. There is another field goal, and then there's a touchdown that did not come from the offense in there as well. There is, although I will point this out, in the second half, there was an interception from Jimmy G, who, by the way, every terrible pass, every sketchy pass he made in this game was 100% related to pressure. Like the defensive line forced him out of the pocket, and while he was on the move, he tried to make throws. The interception that he threw was an attempt to get the ball to George Kittle in the end zone as he was running towards the sideline. He threw it with too much air, and it wasn't sharp enough. It wasn't actually accurate. George Kittle had to come out of the end zone to try and catch it. Luckily for him, somebody else caught it. Adrian Amos made sure that the ball didn't touch the ground. Adrian Amos plays for the Green Bay Packers. So, yeah, there's that. The Packers were basically one-dimensional almost from the jump in this game. If you were not Devontae Adams or Aaron Jones, you got and contributed exactly 6 yards of offense to the Packers' attempt to go to the NFC Championship game for back-to-back years. Straight up. And if you were not Devontae Adams, and you were not Aaron Jones, who combined for 21 targets and almost all of the offense except 6 yards, you were one of the other wide receivers / tight ends for the Packers, which is crazy to think about. By the way, the Packers were up in this game by 3, and they completely abandoned the run, which is weird. That's a choice. It does happen. Like I said before, the playoff brain hits us all. It's very cold. That factors into decision making as well. When you're on pace when you're doing this kind of offense that they were running, where they basically were only throwing the 2 guys, eventually those 2 guys get tired, and that happened in the second half with Aaron Jones. They weren't even getting A.J. Dillon involved, who A.J. Dillon had been a huge part of their run game when Aaron Jones was hurt. And then on top of that, he was their red zone back. He actually scored the first and only offensive touchdown in this entire game. So that led to, I guess this game can be defined as all of the horrible things that the Packers have been hiding for a long time just spilling out of the closet. So they had trouble with the offensive line play up front because Aaron Rodgers got sacked 5 times. 3 of those times were on third down. Clutch. That was because of David Bakhtiari not being able to play in this game. He missed most of the season. They also had to rotate out 2 other offensive linemen, and they picked Billy Turner, who, if I'm not mistaken, 2 years ago was considered to be one of the worst offensive linemen by PFF's metrics, not by my metrics. I'm not trying to pretend that I pay attention to Billy Turner and his career all that much, but I wanted to point out, Billy Turner, I'm pretty sure, was one of the worst offensive linemen in the NFL, and he was playing left tackle for the Green Bay Packers, who, by the way, they said that he did that in the NFC Championship game last year and also struggled. It's weird. A lot of people give Billy, you know what? I respect it. I like it. I like giving the guy a chance, but that was rough. So they had the offensive line problems which they had all season because they've had offensive line injuries all season. And then there's one other. So there's 2 other things. It's the one-dimensional thing where they only throw the ball to 2 people. What is it? Devontae Adams has 100 more targets than the second wide receiver on the Packers. Keyed in on one guy. Aaron Jones. Big part of the run game. Big part of the passing game. That's what makes him so valuable. That's what makes him so deadly. The other thing that was a problem, glaring issue, and it was a glaring issue to the point where Matt LaFleur, who, by the way, after they lost the NFC Championship game 2 years ago, or lost in the playoffs 2 years ago, said that he thinks it was the defense's fault. Like, you can check that quote, but he paraphrased it. He basically blamed the defense for why they lost the game. And lo and behold, the Packers defense is drastically better than it was a couple years ago. And then on top of that, this time, apparently, according to Troy Aikman, he said that he just hopes the special teams doesn't fuck the game away. He didn't say that part away. He didn't say that fuck the game away part, but guess what, guys? Plot twist. A punt attempt from the Packers was swatted up into the air, like into oblivion, off the screen, literally 30 yards up into the air. Everybody's looking around for the ball, and I kid you not, almost like the football guys themselves flicked that ball. It landed right in front of one of the blitzers for one of the punt coverage guys for the 49ers. He scoops it up, and he runs it to the end zone. He ties the game 10-10. The following drive is 4 straight passes. One of them is the first pass is for a first down. It's for like 12 yards. The other 3 are incomplete, and it becomes a 3 and out, and the Packers have to punt the ball away again. A false start during the 4th and 10 punt makes it 4th and 15, and it backs them up 5 yards. They punt the ball. Remember that 5 yards could make a big difference in the theory that I have about this game. Debo basically carries the offense. Debo Samuel carries the offense down the field by himself, essentially. The great blocking up front kind of diminished as the game went on, and I think that's a lot to do with the footing up front. There was that one play that Rashawn Gary on 4th and 1 basically collapsed in the entire offensive line. Somebody signed up a tight end to block Rashawn Gary, who had already at this point had 2 sacks and multiple pressures on Jimmy Garoppolo. But we're going to sign up a tight end to go and block him. They forces a turnover on downs earlier in the game that, luckily for the 49ers, doesn't screw them out of being able to win this one. But the final drive of the game, Debo Samuels catches a 14-yard pass that gets a first down, and then he rushes for 13 yards combined on like 3 different rush attempts. He gets 1 rush attempt for 0, and then he gets 9 yards to get a first down with like 30 seconds left on the clock. They run the timeout, or they let the time keep ticking out, right, with the play clock going. They get Robbie Gould out there. He kicks a 45-yard field goal that I'm not trying to be that guy who just takes a penalty and adds it back on to the distance or whatever based off of like where they started or something like that, because you never know what could actually happen in the game. But that 5 yards looks like it made a major difference in terms of how far down the field the Niners were able to get and how quickly they were able to get down there, because that 5 yards could have made a big difference in terms of field positioning, right? So they get 5 yards closer in theory than they would have, but it would have been like a 50-yard attempt, and they would have to go for another play. And they would have to do that and try and get on the field for another field goal. But nonetheless, it comes down to who made the fewest errors, and by it seems like just one tactical error not being made. For instance, getting your punt blocked into the end zone for a touchdown. The 49ers squeak out a win versus the Green Bay Packers, and they complete an entire weekend of upsets where all but one of the top 2 seeds survives their divisional round of the playoffs, and that's the Kansas City Chiefs, the 2 seed in the AFC. Every seed left is now the Green Bay Packers, who are the 6th seed, the Bengals, who are the 4 seed, and then the Kansas City Chiefs, the 2 seed, and the other low seed left is the LA Rams, who are the 4 seed. And when we come back on Thursday or Friday, probably more likely Friday, we'll have a conversation about how I think those teams will fare. By the way, we went 2-2 on the weekend. I did predict the Bengals to win. I predicted the Rams to win as well. You could go back and look at how tenuous I was about that whole situation. But yeah, I picked the Buffalo Bills to beat the Kansas City Chiefs. I thought it was going to be easier than it turned out to be, because it felt like the Bills kind of had won it, and then 13 seconds was left on the clock, and understandably so. 13 seconds is far too much time for, quite frankly, the guy who's on track to become the greatest quarterback of all time. So, but yeah, and we also picked the Packers to win. Big mistake having faith in, trying to defy the football guys. They've made their choices. They've made their decisions on who shall win and who shall not be victorious. But it is very funny to see that, like, this circle of guys like Sean McVay versus Kyle Shanahan, absolute kryptonite. Kyle Shanahan versus Matt LaFleur, absolute kryptonite for those guys and their connection to one another, because Kyle Shanahan was the offensive coordinator and Matt LaFleur was the QB coach. Interesting. You think you know everything that I know. You learned everything that I taught you, though. That's what it comes off like. And on that note, ladies and gentlemen, I'm out of here. I got stuff to do. I got parties. I'm kidding. I don't have parties to go to. You know what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to scheme my way to that $100 million contract. If you are interested in following me on social media, follow me at FB_playbook. Hit me up on Twitter there. Hit me up on Instagram at TheAshtonForever. That's also my TikTok name. I'm trying to get my TikTok game up so that I can go and do TikTok lives before the show. We are slowly but surely getting 2 followers a week, basically. So I'm going to film a TikTok and then go out and watch Nets versus Nuggets, followed by Jazz versus Suns. Yes, trying to get my game up in terms of making sure that I watch my NBA games like I'm supposed to. All right, y'all. Stay safe. Wash your hands, wash your ass, wash your whole body. Please do that for me. Wash your whole body if you have the ability to do so. And most importantly, don't cough on people. And go home, Roger.